السلام عليكم وأهلا وسهلا في مستمعينا أو مشاهدينا. Welcome everyone in our program today, which is presented by Meditation Center of Kuwait and Bahrain on our every Saturday program. We are happy to have you every Saturday, and today we have a very special guest, our dear brother or friend, Neville Hodgkinson from UK. I'll give you his introduction. It's a very long introduction, yet I know him personally as well, which I will share. So Neville is a journalist and a student of a higher being or self-development. And Neville, you are here. Welcome to Kuwait, Bahrain, Middle East, from all over the world now.
Amazing.
So welcome to the Arab world and the Middle East world.
Lovely to be back.
Welcome. So beside being the journalist and the student of self-development, and he's a practitioner of a spiritual way of understanding the world for many years, understanding the world. He will share this point later. I think he will tap on it. He worked full-time in UK newspapers for more than 30 years, and including 8 years as a medical and science correspondent of the London Sunday Times. He is also a former social policy correspondent of the Times. He's beside all that, he has a big family. He's a father of 2 sons and a grandfather of 5 grandchildren. His life journey could be summarized as one that has taken him from a faith into unfaith. Maybe you would wonder what does that mean? It took me some time to understand it.
No, it's the other way round. From a faith in unfaith,
yes,
to a faith.
So that is a belief in materials science as the best way forward for humanity, from that understanding or that faith to a recognition that spirit runs the whole show. You get now the difference? So it took me some time to understand. Then I went to the depth of understanding, and it was really, really deep. That it's the other way you can understand it, like from recognition that spirit runs the whole show. So today, Neville, brother, will help us in helping the self to heal. And I know him as a great friend, a great brother. When he even came to Kuwait, he gave a very nice speaks. And again, when I've been in the beginning of my journey in self-development, I met him in Oxford. It's a retreat center. And my background is an engineer, so I always wanted to know the logic more than the heart, like the mind more than the heart. And Neville was explaining that time about the power of the thought and in relation to the purity of the thought. So it was a very amazing presentation he did, and that was a part of my paradigm shift, let's say, in understanding the self, understanding the world, which is the journey of the spirit. And the floor is yours, Brother Neville. Welcome back to the Middle East area.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I think it's good. Maybe a little bit, if you can raise it, it would be better.
I can speak a little louder, or I can try the mic here.
Now it's good.
Is that better?
Yes, now it's very good. Clear.
Good, okay. Thank you for that introduction. I didn't quite realize because we haven't been in contact for quite some while, and I didn't realize that in your case, you very much wanted to hear the logic, as well as appreciating what a spiritual understanding does for the heart. And I suppose that's been a part of my story too. Because working as a science correspondent on a big national newspaper here in the UK, I had a kind of affinity with the world of science. And although at the time that I was doing that, I was already on a spiritual journey.
You want to sit here?
I'm sorry? Are you okay?
Yes, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Although, while working as a medical and science correspondent, when I was first working that way, as I said, I had such a belief in science as the best way forward, but that materialistic outlook really, I think, depleted me. It meant that I didn't have any sort of guidance from my heart as to how to live. Everything was through the head. And when I began understanding the spiritual dimension, it was more on the basis of a vibrational experience rather than logic. I felt the beauty in meditators, in practiced yogis from India, in spiritual leaders from different faiths, the ones who were, it wasn't just a dogma, but ones who were really living it. I felt it. I felt these people have got something that is missing in my life. And coming into their company would support me, strengthen me, start to heal me, actually, from a very depleted state. But I felt it wasn't enough. I really felt that I don't want to believe something just because it feels nice. I think that was one reason why previously I'd put a lot of faith in the scientific worldview, because I thought it could get away from human superstition and dogma and differences, you know, that it could tell us what the truth was through numbers or through experiment. And of course it can help us to understand the physical world very well, but the physical world now I understand as being secondary to the spiritual world. That's a whole paradigm shift that isn't the subject of today's talk as such, that shift that is actually beginning to occur within science. But nevertheless, it was very important to me that I should understand what was going on in myself, and that the heart should be accompanied by reason and logic. That was just, you've reminded me, Shaker, that was also a part of my own journey. And so I feel very fortunate that thanks to the opportunity to research and write in these areas, as well as to experience through the practice of meditation, I feel now a very big shift has taken place from, as we said in the introduction, from a faith in unfaith, in the sense that I had a faith in human reason, which was leading me down to a bit of a dead end, actually. From that to a deep sense of the non-physical, there's an intelligence, an informational quality to life and the universe and everything, which orthodox materialistic science has really missed out on. And it's a major problem, especially in those cultures that have in themselves glorified materialistic science. So I've come quite a long way, and I feel as if it's been a great journey that has been a great journey of healing in my own life. When in my mid-30s, I was working very hard and I was quite successful because I was sort of quite ego-driven. And externally things looked okay, but internally I was feeling more and more drained, as if this is what life is about. There must be more to it. And I felt in my family life as if there wasn't enough love present. And so that was certainly my motivation at the outset to help myself. And the English expression "help yourself," and the talk title was "Help Yourself to Heal." You could also say "help yourself to healing," because the English expression "to help yourself" has two meanings really. One is don't be a victim, you can help yourself. And the other is that when you say help yourself, to some meal, it means there's plenty. And really there is plenty with which to help ourselves. It just requires a rekindling of understanding and desire for connection to that healed state. And hopefully that would be why with an interest in that, and I think it's something that the whole world needs, but an interest in that would be perhaps what has led you to tune in today. So if you think about it, which I often do, I absolutely marvel at the way nature, when you see nature at work in the human body, for example, is just so brilliant. We don't have to think about healing a wound. Nature sends all the right cells there to clean out the mess, to do what it can to replace lost cells. Especially when you see this in a child, little ones, it's almost magical. You can almost watch the wound heal after the yell of pain if they've fallen over and cut themselves or something. It's miraculous how fast the healing can take place. I'm just checking yes, I see. I'm just sorry, excuse me. I'm checking the messages that come up.
Neville, I'm sorry, just to let you know that if there is questions, we will address it at the end. And Awatif as well is taking the Arabic questions while she's translating.
Great. Okay, great. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's really good. I look forward to that. So in the meantime, I'll lay a few things out on the table, so to speak. So just first of all, I do feel that, especially in the Western culture, that confidence in nature and nature's wisdom has been lost. There's a sort of arrogance that we can fix things. And that actually, what we do is nothing compared with what nature does. Nature works trillions of miracles every second. I mean, I think the figure for the number of cells in my body is something like 50 to 75 trillion cells, and each one of them is like a little city in its own right, doing its job, knowing how to cooperate in a healthy body with all the others in the different organs. And then, of course, even molecules are made up of phenomenal atoms, and the atoms are made up of vibrational patterns that quantum theory has taught us about. So the complexity and brilliance of nature is just stunning, and we are so foolish to think that we can do better than nature. We almost invariably get in the way of nature. Although, and it's a deeper point, but I think nature herself knows that when we get in the way of what she needs to happen, she also has solutions to that. Anyway, the question then is, if it is so easy, if there is this abundance of healing energy available, why do we suffer? That's a good question, right? Because we do suffer, most of us, to different degrees. My own experience in this was that it was a lack of awareness of how my own faulty thinking was causing me to act wrongly, to respond wrongly, to feel mistakenly. So what was the essence of that faulty thinking? the big shift that has happened for me is in my sense of identity over the sort of I'm now 76. I started on this journey of self-examination and contemplation some 40 years back. I was 37, so nearly 40 years. So the one big shift that has happened has been from an identification with what the psychologists would call the ego, which is actually a sense of self that gets constructed within the wiring of the brain. I'm very clear on this now, that and neuroscientists tell us the same, that they say that the self is an illusion, some of them, because they can see that it has been constructed out of brain circuitry. But that isn't the real self. And when you think that constructed self is who you are and all you are, that in itself actually creates a great insecurity. Because if you're challenged, if your brain circuitry is inadequate, if your sense of identity proves inadequate for a particular situation, you're going to feel it. You'll feel fear, you'll feel anger, you'll feel loss. But if you're, as has happened for me, if your locus of identity, if your sense of who you are shifts, really properly shifts from those internalized ideas that are in your brain circuitry, what the psychologists would say is the ego, if it shifts from that to something deeper, the inner being, you might call it, or in the traditional religious language, the soul or the spirit, if you start to really recognize that that is a reality, it's not just some sort of superstition from the past, which is what I used to think, but that this is a deeper reality than the temporary self constructed in the matter of the brain, that is a fantastic shift to take. And it is that shift of awareness that underpins the vastly happier, more confident, more healed life that I now lead. When you are living from the ego, which I was in a strong way, I think I had a particularly hungry ego. Sometimes children grow up, they're loved and they feel secure. And psychologists would say that they've got a healthy ego. Although, in my view, any sense of self that excludes the spiritual ultimately will prove inadequate. But nevertheless, many people feel that if they've been well brought up and they're secure, they feel quite confident as they move through life. And it may only take some major blow, like the loss of a dear one or some blow at work, and then they realize that they've really been knocked down by it. But I was more vulnerable than that. I feel as if I didn't have that strong an ego structure for a variety of reasons. And so I was always trying to prove myself. I worked extremely hard, but in a driven kind of way. And my work was valued, but it meant that I wasn't really that good as a colleague in those earlier years in my career, because if you're so anxious and concerned and driven, okay, your performance, your output may be there, but you're not going to be a very good person to be alongside. You're always rushing here and there and perhaps always stressed. As a matter of fact, I felt by the time, even though I was working as a medical correspondent, I felt by the time I was in my mid-30s, I was a candidate for a coronary, because I was so stressed by the not being able to put limits on the work, that always needing a bigger headline, a bigger byline, a bigger ratification that I counted, that I was good, I was valued. And a bit similar in the family context, where things were working out okay. I had a lovely wife and we had 2 sons, and I played quite a large part in their upbringing, because my wife was very keen to get moving in as a writer and journalist herself. And I took evening work for some while, so had a good time with the boys when they were small. But as the years went by, I had a kind of, because of this lack of a deeper sense of self, this wounded self, if you like, that needed healing, I was looking to the relationship with Liz, my partner, for that. And that creates a kind of attachment and dependency that, again, actually is not healthy. Sometimes we mistake attachment for love, you know, dependency for love. Oh, I love you, I'll kill myself if you leave me, you know, it's emotional blackmail. It's not real love at all. And there was an element of that where I was needy in that relationship, and ultimately that has healed too. It's amazing. But these are the kind of areas that so many of us, perhaps I was a particularly needy case, but so many of us to different degrees do suffer because of these needinesses with which we're engaging with life and relationships and our work. And as long as we're getting what getting the fix, if you like, of the person or the achievement, then we're okay. But as soon as things start to turn against us, we may be finding ourselves deeply wounded and hurt. And that's when the healing, the need for the healing becomes apparent. One of the problems is that even when you've identified these needs, which I didn't really, but I just sort of deeply unconsciously realized I needed to do something about myself. And when I came across these meditators, I felt, yes, they've got something that I need and want. But you can't just do it, you can't sort of, you can't escape the 40 awareness, the 40 ways of thinking and being, of the kind that I've been describing, as long as you're in the same consciousness. It's a bit like Einstein. You probably heard, he was famous with a quote that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And this applies very much to problems in relationships and problems between myself as an individual and the wider world, that where I have run into problems, and I was running into problems in my personal relationships at work and in the home, where that is the case, you need a shift into a different awareness, a different consciousness. And meditation can certainly be a powerful help in lifting you into a different consciousness, within which you may then be able to see some kind of solutions beckoning. So, because the great thing with meditation is that when it's well practiced, it allows you to step back from situations that are distressing you. So it gives you tools with which to detach, even if it's just briefly. As I say, to really heal, you've got to have that change of consciousness. But it's a good start to be able to step into a peaceful atmosphere, to listen to the voice of a meditator, to look into the eyes of some of these really experienced yogis who I met. There was so much joy that I experienced in almost like a child in a way, drawing on love and wisdom that others had made as part of themselves, but it wasn't yet mine. But nevertheless, that can still give you a helping hand. And so that's how I started. There's a saying that meditation is, I think there was an Elizabethan poet, Sir Philip Sidney, meditation is to grow rich in that which never taketh rust. Take Old English, to grow rich in that which doesn't get rusty. It's like there's something eternal about meditation and connecting with this realm, that whereas everything, when we're putting energies into everything in the world around us, the outside world, building a home, family, work, career, all of these things, they are here today and gone tomorrow. But there's something about that inner world which is eternal. And meditation starts to connect you to that eternal realm. And so that in itself is helping yourself to heal. The experiences that I felt especially when I came into personal contact, actually, not so easy with lockdowns and all the rest of it, but on the other hand, these methods of connecting through electronically are brilliant now at saving us getting onto planes and having to sort of all the energy and expense of getting around. But I did find that there's something about human contact that is also healing. You may know that the heart has a very powerful it has a powerful electric field, I think many times greater than the brain's, but the magnetic field that comes from the heart is something like 5,000 times greater than the brain's. It extends several feet from the body, and it's like a radar, you know. If it is very positive, if your battery is well charged and your heart is healed, the goodness that comes off from such a heart spreads outwards, and it's almost like it can read other people and nourish them. And I found that in those early days of my journey, my spiritual journey, that coming into the contact of people who had practiced this awareness of the inner dimension, the divine, that when they were well practiced in it and I came into their contact, I would feel drawn into the experience of their own love and happiness and peace. And that was invaluable in helping me to get me going. But of course, that's like being a child. It's not yet your own. So more than that is needed. But it does give you a chance to see what could lie ahead for you, and also helps you to begin to see what habits of mind actually get in the way of that wholeness, that peace, happiness and love. Without experiencing that, you have no goal in a sense. You might just conclude that life is horrible mess and entails all sorts of hurts, and that's that. But when you taste something of the higher consciousness, it really does get you going. And it gives you a chance to see what habits of thought cause that battery of your well-being to get run down. You know, what caused the energy of the spirit to leak away. And one of the big ones that I can mention is being critical. You know, as a journalist, of course, some of the stories I did, I was trying to highlight achievements in medicine, and some amazing technologies and wonderful human stories at times. But a lot of it as well was highlighting mistakes that were being made, wrong thinking that was causing loss of life unnecessary, all sorts of controversies. And in a way, the critical mind that I had in that negative state, you know, before I learned how to heal internally, partly fitted me for that. So the work and the character, I was not escaping from that attitude of a critical and judgmental approach to life. But that in itself is not helpful. It's good to see clearly. I'm not saying we should walk around with rose-tinted spectacles. If you do that, life is going to trip you up. You'll fall over. You have to see clearly. But it's really important to develop a context of understanding that allows you not to be critical, not to hold things in your heart, but to realize that all of us are in the same boat. All of us have different weaknesses, different strengths, and to view things as many of the great spiritual teachers have taught, with mercy, with love, with compassion, that if we approach our relationships like that, it both allows others to open up to you because they feel more confident that you're not going to attack them. And it allows you to see more clearly their needs because they're more open with you, and your radar works well. And you're not so self-absorbed, worrying about the leakage and the hurt and the lack of self-respect inside yourself. So that in itself, learning how to be more loving and compassionate in the way you see others, I saw that as being a major element in my own change. One other big one I wanted to mention was losing yourself in another person, and that also was something of a tendency, as I've indicated, in relation to my partner, but I tended to do that in other contexts as well, that instead of having that self-confidence, I would be allowing myself to be led in ways that could mislead me. And it was very noticeable that when I started to heal with the kind of methods that I'm speaking of, my relationships in the office changed quite dramatically. I became better able to listen to what other people had to say. I was less reactive. Same in the home, actually. The big shift there has been from dependency to what I would say is a real love. It's been a long story, but there's a very big change has happened. The thing is that these habits, like being critical of others or habits of dependency, they seem so much a part of the human condition that we don't recognize them very often. We think, well, that's human, that's just being human. But they harm us. They do trigger negative feelings and emotions inside us. And they, for example, fear. And that depletes our strength and it limits our own expression of what we are. When you're fearful all the time, you hold yourself back, especially the hungry ego that fears a knock. It will not dare to risk criticism or failure. And that is one of the biggest things that can deplete our lives. And it can block communication. You can cause hurt to others without realizing it when you're in that needy state. Also one other thing that happens is you identify more and more when the neediness is there, it's like a vicious circle that develops where you identify more and more with things of outward show, like what you look like, and the brand of your car, or how much money you got in the bank. These things, all of them are fine in themselves. There's no problem with having lots of money in the bank, or I would rather like that. Or, looking at your best, or having a lovely car, no problem. It's when we identify with them, and therefore, when they take a knock and it hurts you and depletes you, or someone else has got a better car than you, or your looks are fading, or your strength isn't what you thought it was. All of these things of life, they hurt. They knock us down, and over time, it really makes life feel rather dry and empty. And there's a solution to all of this. That's the joy of it. And the solution is that meditation, as I've learned it, teaches you to bypass this kind of brain conditioning, these habits of making you look at the world in this critical and judgmental way, or this needy way. You learn to use the mind, and this is the key. You learn to use the mind in relationship with the divine. And as I said, for me, it's been quite a long time coming because of that faith in unfaith that I had previously, that faith in materialistic, scientific approaches to the world. But I really now, I've studied this quite intensely in recent years, and I know that the divine is a reality. Of course, many others feel that instinctively anyway, and I'd rather lost sight of it. But I know it with my reason as well as with my heart. And that has licensed me, in a sense, to a confident relationship with a, it's like a source. I'm not that comfortable with religious type words because so many awful things have been done in the name of God. But there is a truth, there is a supreme source, and we can make that one our companion. It's like you can draw on the energy of that beautiful one when you know the right way to live and act. And that is what makes the difference. That's what keeps the battery well charged. You're taking your sense of self-respect and strength from an inner place. Inner in the sense that it's not dependent on the material world and on people and possessions and positions around you. It's dependent on attention to keeping the line to that one open. And that is actually fairly straightforward. It includes things like recognizing that whenever you let yourself be disturbed or critical or judgmental or hurt even, and not to judge yourself for allowing those things to happen, but when they do happen, you have to recognize that the disturbance that those negativities create is what cuts you off from that connection with that source. So you lost your lifeline in a sense, and then your well-being, your positivity, your energy of truth leaks away, and then other old habits may fire up, and you may find yourself on a cycle going down. But the beauty of understanding what you're doing with meditation is you can start to spot those leaks and breaks, and you can, and you, as I say, you mustn't beat yourself up about them. That is so wrong. Guilt has no place on the path of transformation, I heard one of my meditation teachers say once. Yes, you can pinch yourself, if you make mistakes, but to wallow in guilt about yourself is absolutely contraindicated for healing. You must not do that. I had something of that tendency myself, but I've really overcome that because I've seen that is not the way the One sees me. The One sees with sort of total compassion and acceptance. Right is right and wrong is wrong. It's not saying that everything is nothing, that there are real differences in how we behave, in our standards, that will connect us to that truth and keep us connected to it, or that will take us away from it. And that is just a mechanism that is as real as electromagnetism or whatever that the scientists have taught us about. So this is a wonderful thing, to understand and accept the human condition today, and with that understanding and acceptance, both of myself and of others around me, to move towards the experience of the inner being, so that this deeper, eternal aspect, and I mean eternal, it really is indestructible, this deeper, eternal aspect of our being comes to the fore in my life. And it's that really, really heals. It really is, accompanied by recognition of the things that may continue to cause you to hurt. And I want to tell you a quick story here. One of my teachers in London was an elderly yogi from India called Daddy Janki. Some of you may have heard of her. She died in March, I think it was, a few months ago, aged 104. And she was very remarkable. She was one of these people who had really dedicated her life since she was about 19 or 20 to cleaning out the heart and the head so that there would be this powerful connection, unbroken connection. I remember someone saying to her once, how much of the day do you spend in meditation? She said, the question is, how much of the day am I not in meditation? And but she was still a human being, and she had come to Oxford, where I was living at that time, and I was comparing what was supposed to be a discussion program between this Daddy Yankee, this elderly lady, and a top British architect. And the architect, the program was supposed to be about 40 minutes of conversation, and then there was going to be questions. So the architect said he'd speak for 2 minutes. He actually spoke for 10. And then Daddy Yankee started speaking, and she hadn't really received an understanding, I don't think, of what the architect had said. So she was speaking her own things, and she'd been going for about 20 minutes. So half an hour, 30 minutes of the 40-minute program had gone, and there was no discussion. And so I tried to intervene, and she was a toughie. She didn't, she would get this bony finger. So when I tried to intervene, ek minute, she said, 1 minute. And so another minute or two went by, and I tried again. And then I tried a third time, and she was really irritated with being interrupted. And she said that how she hated it when she was a girl, and the British it was the Empire days where the British were in India, and the British would talk down to the Indians. And I was so hurt. I thought I was trying to do my job. And but anyway, I think this was just something, that came out of her past. So she still needed a little bit of more healing, even when she was about 90 or whatever that time that was. But I stuck my legs out. I just refused to do anything further for the program. Just let her speak, and then a little bit of question and answer. That was that. I was really upset, and I went home and I tried to remove this from my mind, but couldn't stop feeling about it. She returned to London, where she was living, and I woke up about 2 in the morning with this hurt still very strong, and I thought, I'm going to have this out with her. And so I got in the car, I drove down to London, and I confronted her in her room. I said, what you said to me last night was like a dagger in my heart. And she didn't say, what do you mean? She didn't say, I'm awfully sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. She just said, pull it out. Pull the dagger out. She said it was so much power that I did. And that was the end of it. No need to discuss any further. It was a very powerful lesson, because, what's the point of walking around with a dagger in your heart? It's obviously irrational. Yes, sometimes you need to talk things through, but this was just something that had bubbled up, and she had been irritated and I'd been hurt, and that was that. So why dwell on it? Why keep going on about it? Which I didn't. It ended it just like that. It was such a powerful lesson. And really, in life, we once you know how to make this connection with really, and draw on that strength inside, and you realize the value of it in healing your past hurts and in giving you the strength even to be a healing for others by the love and goodwill you can radiate to others. Once you really get the knack of that, you don't want anything to break that connection. And so Daddy had become a master at not allowing anything to penetrate her heart. And if something did hurt her, she would instantly remove it. And this is also part of the secret of really getting a very high level of healing into your life. So I hope that gives you some idea of the principles involved in this. I would say that as my understanding of this beautiful source, this beautiful truth grew, And I was able to keep that sense of truth beside me, nourishing me. I was both better able to see the weaknesses that remain, and with kindness, instead of, oh God, you know, beating myself up. No, just see them and remove them. That's okay. That's something that I loved when I was in Bahrain, and heard often this expression, inshallah, God willing, as I understand it. And that is such a valuable thing to hold in mind too, because it implies an acceptance of what is to happen and what is. What's the point of fretting and being angry and upset about what has already happened? That's not going to help anything. And yes, you need to think about the future, you need to monitor yourself for the future, but actually I've learned also that to have confidence that ultimately truth comes through, and that nature has a very deep wisdom in how she is operating with us. That confidence also gives me the strength to feel, inshallah, about the future too. And then also one's able to work without ego. That's so valuable as well. Instead of the ups and downs, you know, the roller coaster ride of an ego that's puffed up one day and deflated the next, instead of that, to be able to move through life smoothly is so lovely. Okay, so I feel as if this has brought about a lot of healing in body and spirit, and I feel very lucky, and I hope some of that has been of some value. I'm sure that quite a lot of you will be very familiar with these dynamics anyway, but thanks for your attention. And I think it's now, I'm not sure, I think now we thought we would have a little meditation, a few minutes of meditation, and then question and answer. Is that right? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will just, I'm afraid I'm not that much of a A, B, C, D, E kind of meditator. I find that I just remind myself, I just remember the beauty of the inner being and its relationship with the Supreme. So I'll speak a few words along the lines of how I may think when I'm taking myself into contemplative mode. It's very useful to know that positive feelings connect you to that source, whereas hurt feelings automatically disconnect you. So to count your blessings, that ancient wisdom is very relevant. I think to myself, with great gratitude of where I've come from, the pain I was in when I was that candidate for a coronary, the beautiful learning that's come my way, the many friends I've made along the journey, the healing that has taken place in my relationship to myself, those that I'm close to, and in my attitudes with work. And to be able to share with a group of people such as the Bahrain Meditation Center bring together, hugely appreciative of this. So when you think of feelings of a positive kind, they're a very good first step towards making the connection that heals. It's as if this intelligence that is in nature has positivity and love at its root, as well as the Supreme. Nature is troubled, whereas God, as I understand God now, is beyond all of that. Like a reference point of what is highest in us. But nature too has beauty and strength still to different degrees. I'm sitting beside an ocean, and the constant movement, the changing sky and sea also uplift me, reminding me of the flow of life, and that there's benevolence ultimately in everything that happens. There are times when it just doesn't seem as if one could possibly see any benefit in things at a personal level and among those you love and in the world at large. But our little intellects are usually not aware of the fuller picture. And when you start to monitor and understand these deeper spiritual dynamics of how the world works, gradually the faith does grow that really there's benefit in everything. That acceptance in itself gives me the strength to carry on and to keep myself open to the healing power of the One. Peace, love, and wisdom bring the power to heal. And when we look for them outside of ourselves, in this material realm, the solution is only always temporary. But when we learn how to draw on the love and wisdom from that divine source, we grow rich in that which never taketh rust.
Thank you, dear Neville. It was beautiful. And you took us all to this healing stage. Just taking out some points from your beautiful class. And the only way going to a healing stage is by shifting the consciousness. And if you sense who you are, from being the ego, I am the brain, and I am this beautiful soul of all of this wisdom and love. I liked your story as well with Daddy Jenkins, which was the chairman of the university, that taking this dagger from the heart, like instantly. And yes, rather than keeping it there for long, and the bleeding starts, and then the infection starts, and all that. So, how to remove instantly? That was a nice feeling process. And the very deep point from, especially we all face it in relationship, which is the dependency of love to real love. That was a great point that you shared about the actual relationship you faced it. And ending with this radar thing, when we have the meditation, as you were sharing with the divine, the positive positivity that we radiate, and the ones around us, the people around us can feel it and draw that from their own. I liked it from their own as well. You let them take it from the divine, and they feel it in their own. So there is quite a good number of questions, but I don't know if we have the time. I will ask whichever available now. But anyway, there is a lot of thanks and appreciating this class. One of the questions is, it's about the emotional part. You spoke about emotional neediness from experience. Do you believe you got over that by awareness through your meditation, and that you could still be around those old relationships, but be healed? Like, still the source is there? That's one question. Shall I ask them all and then you answer, or one by one?
One by one, probably easier. Okay. Yes.
His or her question.
If I've understood that question correctly, a big breakthrough happened for me when I was in a gathering, and we'd had quite an intensive retreat and a lot of opportunities for journaling, for looking within, for connecting in a very beautiful atmosphere. And at the end of it, each of us was invited to sit in front of an image that's a bit like the one behind me, this sort of like a sense of a source. And there was a little pile of papers there and a pen. And the idea was that if you felt that you were receiving some message from the divine, you could write it down. And we went one at a time like this. And as I sat, it was as if a voice in my head, and obviously not a sound as such, but it really was so clear, and it couldn't have been me. It just came out of the blue. It said, "With me, you can fulfill your longing to love." And I felt as if this was the first time that I really knew that this benevolent one was accessible, and that if I kept my mind with that one, I really could have the strength to continue with my relationships, ones that previously had held a lot of difficulties, that they would be transformed. And this turned out to be the case. It was quite remarkable. It came after, as I've indicated, a journey of self-discovery, of practice of healing, but it was as if all of that got encapsulated with these words that came to me. I felt as if, not that I'm doing it all the time, no way. I mean, but I only have to remember that, and it tops my battery up and gives me the strength to live my relationships in this new way, where instead of the neediness or desire, the relationship is one of respect and giving. And it is that, definitely, it's that connection that that has given the strength to do that. And I don't always succeed in it, but it's immeasurably much better than it used to be.
Yeah, thank you, Neville. And this would lead us to the other question regarding the divine. I don't know if I quite understood it, but it's like about the divine. How did you know the divine in a way? Like, how did you feel his presence? This was a question. How do you feel his presence? And Neville, there is like 4 or 5 questions, so I don't know if the time can, if we can keep the answers in a bit shorter time to capture all the questions.
So this one was how do...
How did, I mean, that's the way it's written. How can you assure the presence of the divine? It's like, how did you feel?
Yes. Yes, I understand. It's that uncertainty was in me for a long time. I feel as if I did experience the presence of the divine almost from the beginning. It's like, as I explained, I was given a gift of some very beautiful experiences of self-transcendence, of a love and peace that was quite unlike my everyday worried self. But even though that made a difference, quite a big difference, especially in the workplace fairly early on, because from being like the battery really low, that was actually giving me some charge, but to really make it mine, which I feel it is now, that cognitive shift, as I like to call it, had to take place. And that came about actually through a lot of study, a lot of spiritual study, both within a tradition that has been of great help to me, that Daddy Janki belongs to, but also looking at the commonalities between faiths, especially in that deep experiential sense, and indeed at frontier science, what's called the consciousness-based paradigm in science, which is pointing towards the importance of mind and the mind of nature, as well as the mind of God, in the way our lives and this great play of existence unfolds. So I can't really say more than that. It was except that it did take time. From an initial experience that was lovely, but I questioned it. Was this just, was I just feeling something better? Maybe it was endorphins in my brain or something like that. But then this whole cognitive shift arising from the study. And so I think spiritual study is really important, of the right ideas.
And the other question goes like, if we are practicing the meditation, as you were sharing about the importance of meditation, but we need to play our role. So how can we do that, especially that the surrounding is very, we are surrounded with very corrupted people. I think it's a business background person who's talking now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a really good question. Um, the newspaper office that I continued to work in for a long time after I had begun my spiritual journey was also not that conducive an environment to deep contemplation. You know, you've got news editors shouting at you, where's the copy? You've got phones ringing, you've got deadlines to meet and headlines and all the rest of it. So it was a struggle, and I did. I actually feel I'm trying to get, even though I'm in my sort of mid to late 70s now, but I'm actually trying to get back into something of the world of newspapers, having been away from it for quite a long time. After my 30 years in newspapers, I went to live at a retreat centre, and I can't say that that was necessarily in itself made things any easier, but in some ways they were more difficult. The challenges to me of stepping outside the regular work that I'd had and understood previously into something where, you know, I was just kind of a whole new world in a sense. Those challenges were very great, but they did make me eventually study and practice enough to make this breakthrough, this, as I call it, this cognitive shift, so that I understand myself as a soul instead of as a lump of matter that happens to, you know, as I used to think, just a complex lump of matter out of which consciousness has arisen as a result of billions of years of evolution. I no longer see things that way, but that's another story which we could perhaps meet and discuss some other time.
Yeah, and then there is another question. It's a bit long, but
oh, sorry, just a little bit more on that last question, Shaker.
yes.
Just one very quickly. What I've found is that you can more and more, once you've got the knack, it's a kind of knack. This connection is a sort of knack, and once you've caught that, you can catch yourself when you're moving away from that stability and reconnect and recharge quickly. Even little opportunities like going to the toilet or making a cup of coffee, things like that. So you come and go. You have to try and keep the battery topped up.
Yeah. Hold it on. It's like holding it.
Yes, exactly. Yes, holding and recharging regularly.
Yes. So I think we will have this last question because of time. What if in the past I have said something abruptly, some harsh words, and it has hurt the other very deeply, and they don't want to connect with you? Over the period, you have accepted the fact, but the guilt remains that they don't speak to us and still carry the hurt with them. How to heal self and other person?
That's a great question. Yeah. I think it has to be done mentally. There are some things that words won't do the job. But when you understand that we are actually all very deeply and subtly connected, in the philosophy that I espouse now, I have a sense of there being like a seed or a source from which we have all come. And when one takes one's mind back to that source, you're actually re-establishing connections with the whole. You don't have to think that you have to heal directly to another person that you have hurt. But if you can take your mind to the source, to the one, and bearing in mind that there is that wound, that you're taking the strength into yourself, and through your connection with that source, that the strength should go to the one that you've hurt. It's like the strength come out towards them from that source, arising from your taking your mind to the source. And it works. It really works. And then you have to be patient with that. And you mustn't feel guilt, because that guilt blocks your ability to connect to the Father, to the One, to this beautiful being that we find it so difficult to find the right words for, because it's something right outside of the material realm. But when we've got the knack of connecting, and guilt will get in the way of that knack, it's as if you, by taking your mind to that one and knowing that there is a wound to be healed in relation to another, that one will do the healing towards the other. And in time, you'll find that it will come right. I've seen that work for myself too. I've made mistakes myself in the past, which left long-standing problems, but in time, they really do heal. But the healing has to come from your relationship with God, rather than through regretting and worrying about the harm that was done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's clear. Very nice. So I think by just reading another one. There is someone about the seeker, but it's like I just get to understand it more. Sorry. Yeah, there is one about the lessons, but I think we can brief it to them. And the rest is all really very thankful for this. They are just putting their notes on how great is this class, and how useful and helpful.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for setting it up, and thanks to everyone for taking part.
Yeah, and they wanted an international global peace, a peace satellite to help to heal the world, not only heal individuals, which is a nice statement. So I think we are coming to the end. Thanks a lot, Neville brother, and for Sister Awapah, who've been translating non-stop.
Yeah. Hello to our Tief. Yeah.
Awapah is in the Arabic room. And it is Bahrain and Kuwait Center in cooperation. We are sending every Saturday a seminar, and for all the audience, you can be with us every Saturday. The time could change depending on the speaker, whether in England or in India or on America. So accordingly, we change the time because of the time change. So you can see our meditation centers, the numbers, the references, the addresses. Contact us, you can communicate with us.
It's so great.
Yeah, we are doing it, Neville, every week. And we have Brother Hans next week. He's from the environmental background. And we will announce it to all of you. And some had put a note that they love the dagger story. I think it's a bit different. So thank you very much, Neville. We hope to see you again. Inshallah, as you shared it.
Inshallah.
Thanks a lot for the audience, for everyone, the incognito, the behind the camera, who set these 3 rooms. Thank you, everyone, for all the support, and the audience, and your comments and notes. It helps us to continue our mission, our support to the world, as you were sharing. Thank you, and goodbye. And Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.